Welcome to the Psychotherapy Central podcast, where we discuss love, attachment, and healing from trauma. A place where you can gain the knowledge, tools, and wisdom to help you build secure, flourishing relationships. I'm your host, clinical psychotherapist and couples therapist, Jennifer Nurick. Hi, I'm Jen, your host of the Psychotherapy Central podcast. I'm a fully qualified clinical psychotherapist, couple therapist, and energetic healer. I've been in private practice for over 17 years now, and today we're discussing something every parent experiences, that I'm aware of anyway, is worry about our children. We all do it, but when does worry become excessive? And what can we do about it? We'll explore these questions and more in today's episode. So I like to talk about things that I have experience with, and I have experience with both children and worry. I'm lucky enough to have two beautiful children, a 13-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boy. And as their mother, I always have three tasks in mind. My tasks are attunement, protection, and guidance. Now, attunement is to know what's going on with them, to be curious about their well-being, to get to know when they look down and they look a bit forlorn, to move closer, to know how they would like to be supported. And when I don't know, to be able to ask them and give them the language to be able to ask for how they'd like me to be with them and to support them. Protection is to ensure that they have an adequate amount of protection that's age appropriate, and to guide them again in an age appropriate way, to offer the guidance when they need it and when they'll receive it, especially as we move into the teenage years. Not all guidance is received, as other parents of, any children really at any age, I guess, guidance is not always received, but to be there with a loving and open heart to offer guidance, to offer protection, and hope that it is received. So there's an overview of what I feel are the main tasks of a parent, and those are things that attachment shows us, attachment research into secure attachment, that is necessary to cultivate that secure attachment is attunement, protection, and guidance. Now let's talk about worry as a parent. So firstly, what is worry? Worry is feeling anxious or troubled about actual or potential problems. Essentially, worry is trying to keep us safe. It's the feeling that I get in my body when there's an actual or potential problem. Now, I've really noticed in Western culture, as parents, we get a lot of mixed messages about parental worry. On the one hand, we celebrate the idea of being a vigilant and caring parent. And on the other hand, if there's kind of too much worry, we worry that we might be enmeshed with our children. And this cultural narrative suggests that if we're overly concerned, we might be overprotective or incapable of letting our kids grow independently, which obviously we don't want. So these messages can create a sense of guilt or inadequacy in parents, making them feel as though their natural instincts to worry are flawed or even damaging. And so I guess differentiating between appropriate worry and excessive worry. And I think that this can add to the complexity that exists in the parenting space, and how comfortable we can be with experiencing our own genuine concern that comes up without other parts of us coming in to be concerned about the concern. Yeah. So as a psychotherapist, I see worry about our children as generally a positive sign, meaning that you care about your children. So let's start by acknowledging that worrying about children within our current cultural context seems to be quite a normal phenomena. It's definitely something that I've experienced. And many parents, I mean, there's so much literature now about how to feed our baby, how to make sure they're getting enough food, when they should be sleeping, how to keep them safe, about them making friends. And so just the volume of literature around raising children, I think, shows the amount of worry and concern that is coming up in parents nowadays. So it can be a sign, worry can be a healthy sign of love and commitment to our children's well-being, and part of the protective instinct in a parent that helps to ensure that a child is growing up happy and healthy. And so there are certain worries that are kind of common and expected. Now, this might be a new idea for many of you, but what if we change worry from being an emotion that we feel we have no control over to being a sign that something is feeling off, that something needs attention? So let me give you an example. A few years ago, one of my children was having an issue at school. Some days were fine and other days were upsetting. And this child would come home and share with me, and I would empathize and try to help. And as a mama, of course, I just wanted the problem to go away. I would like to have wrapped that child up in cotton wool and just kept them safe in my arms and for the pain to just dissipate. And I found myself worrying about what was going on, and I had little real control over any of what was going on. It involved other people, was happening at school, not at home. And I found that worrying for me came in bursts. So it wasn't a consistent, but it was kind of a background unease. And then I would have periods where I'd find that my mind would go into overdrive, and then my body would start to feel anxious, which for me felt like tightness in my chest and kind of butterflies in my stomach. I would find myself kind of thinking over the situation, get a little bit panicky, and then I would find myself discussing it with my husband. And this was my sign that I needed to try something different. So worry for me became a message. So over a period of, I'd say it was about 8 months to a year with this child, we tried several different things to tackle the problem. And that was mostly me working with the child, just kind of suggesting things. And I was being supported by a couple of my friends and my husband at the time. I still have the same husband. I'm just thinking back in time. So just to clarify that. And we found between me and the child that some things worked better than others. But in the end, we did find something that really worked. And I keep saying the child because I have a boy and a girl to help them stay anonymous. I'm not using gender. So some of you thinking, why is she doing that? That's just to keep anonymity for my precious ones. So there are a few things that happened during this period for that child. They learned that they're not alone with difficult things, right? They learned that I'm interested, that I care about them, that I'm willing to think about them during the day, to let what's going on for them have an impact on me, mentally, physically, emotionally, enough that I'm with them, that I'm motivated enough to be with them in solving this issue. I'm not letting it overwhelm me. I'm not having sleepless nights. I'm not panicking about them going to school. But there's a sense that I'm in there with them to help them find a solution. And we don't have the solution straight away. And that's life. That's a great life lesson. We don't have the solution right away, but we're in it together to find the solution. So another thing that this child learned is that the answer is not always the first thing you try. You might need to try lots of different things, and that's okay. That's part of the process. Interestingly, the thing that worked the best was something that they came up with when we were brainstorming. And so this child learnt that I can follow my gut feelings and my gut knowings about what might solve this issue. And the thing that solved this issue was quite a big change in their life. So they made a really big change. They took a big risk and it paid off. They also learned that things pass. So some things are a phase, and we can take action, and quite big action, and things can change quite significantly. So in this situation, my worry was a part of my natural empathy, which empathy is standing in someone else's shoes, and care for my kids. I'm standing in their shoes, imagining what that thing might be like for them, and I'm feeling motivated to help. And the sense there is that if one of my children have a problem, then we all have a problem. We can jointly own the issue as a family. And how that worked in my family system then was the child had the problem, I was the main support person, and my husband was supporting me. We didn't bring the other child into it because the other child wasn't really impacted, might have had some helpful solutions, but I would have checked with the child who had the problem before I went to talk to the second child whose problem it wasn't, right? Just in terms of permission and transparency. So in this way, the child is not carrying the weight of that burden on their own. Yeah, this is something they've never encountered before. They're looking for guidance, they're looking for protection, and they're looking for attunement. And so my job as parent is to step forward and offer those things to the best of my ability without taking over, without smothering, without assuming that the child can't manage on their own. Now, sometimes worry can cross a line and become excessive. Now, this type of worry can feel overwhelming and all-consuming. I find in my practice and in myself that often when worry tips over and becomes overwhelming and all-consuming, that often there is a trigger for me. Now, what does that mean? When there is a trigger for me, it means that one of my children is experiencing something that perhaps I experienced also as a child or as an adult and is unresolved in me. So that when I see it happening in my child, I feel some of the unprocessed feelings and emotions that I had when I was experiencing that. And then I look through that lens at what is happening to my child, and it feels more overwhelming, more panicky. And that part of me that is holding my trauma around that thing gets blended with me and can actually amplify the whole situation and make it worse. That is a clear sign for me. Jen, with a lot of compassion, Jen, there's some unprocessed stuff there for you. Yep, it's really triggering my stuff. Now's time for me to go and see my therapist and to work through, to hold the parts of me that went through that, to help them in their healing process so that they can integrate back into my system, so that I can hold my child while they go through it in a more grounded, centered, open way, without the panic, without the excessive worry. So what might excessive worry look like? How would I know? It might be a constant sense of dread or anxiety about your child. It might be obsessively checking on them, avoiding situations where you feel that they're at risk. You might even start to feel physically ill from the stress, not sleeping. And it can affect the relationship with your child, but also your other family members. And kids often pick up on parents' anxiety. And you might find that your child starts to become anxious or insecure themselves, or more anxious and insecure than they were before. So a few more signs: constant fear. Physical symptoms could be headaches, stomach aches, or other physical symptoms when you find that this worry about your child peaks. Interference with daily life. You might find yourself thinking about the issues at work, before bed, that when your mind has nothing to do, it kind of goes into this worrying. And you can think of worrying as a part of you that's trying to find a solution logically. Now, some situations have a logical solution and some of them don't. So sometimes the worry is just sending you in a worry loop and you know where the worry loop ends. It ends up in you feeling more anxious and stressed than you were before. And some worrying can be kind of productive if you come to okay, I'm going to try this, and I'll remind myself that we're going to try that, and we'll see what happens. If you recognize these signs of over worry in yourself, some of the steps you can take to manage it are, number one, challenging your negative thoughts. Now, a great tool for this in psychotherapy is called CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. For thoughts, cognitive behavioral therapy can be super helpful. In my view, it's limited in terms of trauma therapy, but there is a trauma branch of CBT. Around this particular topic, worrying about your children, I've created a worksheet that you can safely use to work on this topic. I've put the link to the worksheet in the show notes. I've tested it out on a few parents. They've all said they found it really helpful in order just to work through what's going on for them. And all of them said it actually flowed on and had an impact with their kids. So I highly recommend just hop onto the show notes. There's a link to go through and you can grab that resource. It takes you through some specifically crafted questions around worry that you have for your child, and it actually helps you to create an action plan. Tip 2 is to set aside some worry time. A number of clients have said that they found this really helpful, is to designate a specific time each day to think about your worries. And that can sometimes help people contain the anxiety to a specific part of the day rather than letting it kind of flow over. Number 3 is talk to someone. So sharing what's going on with friends, with family members, with a therapist can help you gain support, get ideas, and feel supported. It's that whole idea of a village. I know when I was going through my issue, I did a bit of all of that. I spoke to a therapist, I spoke to friends, and I also had my husband as a great support. Focus on what you can control. So instead of worrying about things out of your control, instead focusing on actions that you can take. And lastly, but I would maybe put this as number 1, is seeking professional help. If your worries are interfering with daily life, really consider talking to someone who's trained in how to work with anxiety, working with a therapist. I would say if you're experiencing the one I spoke earlier about, when you feel it's triggering you, where you're having more of a response than you think you should be to what's going on with your child, often there's unresolved trauma that sits there. So I would go and speak with a trauma therapist, someone trained in internal family systems, something that I'm trained in, EMDR I find very helpful, schema therapy can be helpful. There's lots of different sort of modalities within psychotherapy. I would recommend that you go online, maybe have a read about lots of different types of therapy and see what resonates. So remember, it's okay to worry about your children. It's a sign that you care deeply about them, which is a good thing. But it's also important to find balance and not to let the worry take over your life. And by using some of the strategies we've discussed, you can manage your worry in a healthy way. It is possible. And you might be sitting here thinking, my mother worried, my grandmother worried. And in some cultures, it's very much a form of love. You show love to your children by worrying about them. And so check that out. How was that for you as a child? Was it something that really enabled you to feel free and to grow and explore? Or was it something that felt stilted for you? In which case it could be some intergenerational patterning that you might feel, I'm ready to change that. Again, that's something that we can work with in psychotherapy and in energetic and spiritual healing, in internal family systems. We can specifically focus on intergenerational patterning. It's part of the work I actually get super excited about and love to do. I do see people one-on-one if you would like to have a session with me, and I also have a team. We work internationally because in Australia, as psychotherapists, we can have global insurance. So do reach out if you would like to book a session. So thank you for joining me on this episode of Psychotherapy Central. I hope you found the discussion helpful and reassuring. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in the future, please reach out through social media. My handle on Instagram is psychotherapy.central. Remember that you're not alone with your worries. We're all in this together. So if you found this episode valuable, you could help me out by giving me a like, a subscribe, a share. The show notes for today are available on my website, psychotherapycentral.health, where you'll also find my free course on breaking relationship cycles and links to lots of other offerings. So thank you for being here, and wherever you are, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me on this episode. If you want to learn more about all things love, attachment, and trauma, I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at psychotherapy.central or visit my website at psychotherapycentral.health. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review and a 5-star rating. Your support means a lot, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.